Hey folks, I just picked up the 30-inch benchtop metal brake. The brand name is Power Fist in Canada, sold by Princess Auto. Same thing is sold in the US by Harbor Freight. This is a hobby or DIY metal brake with 30-inch width, so you can bend something up to 30 inches wide. The actual brake is a little bit wider than that, as they often are. It's close to 30 3/4. You could actually stuff in there. But this is not a professional tool. But I wanted to see if it'll do what I need to do, which is bending up small stuff for like maybe an exhaust cover for a vent on my garage, a little aluminum tray for a battery box on my boat, stuff like that. So what's in the box? 4 pieces. This is the bed of the brake. It's not going to win any awards for beauty, but I was surprised taking it out that it's pretty solid. It's a hefty chunk of steel. This is all welded up out of angle irons. So there's a little bed, and it's just about a 1/4 inch thick. It's a little less. It must be, I'm not sure, just a hair under a 1/4 inch thickness angle irons there. The other pieces are 2 handles to make the foldy bits fold up. They just slide in. There's no way to fasten them in that I can see. I guess you could epoxy them if you really wanted to. And then there's this bar that's used to clamp your stock down onto the bed of the brake. So that gets positioned on here, clamped down with your own clamps. They don't provide them. And then you can bend your metal like this. So this bar is actually interesting. It's not just a piece of flat stock. It's actually machined on all 4 sides. If you look at the profile, and it's almost 7/16 thick. That's a heavy-duty piece of steel right there. It weighs a few pounds, and it's going to do a really good job of clamping down some sheet. If you look at the profile of that guy, it's actually beveled, angled down a little bit, that direction and that direction. It doesn't matter which way you use it. Ground on all 4 sides, as I said, fairly good finish, but it will scratch if you've got some really sort of shiny steel, or steel with a delicate finish on it, or this is aluminum actually. It will scratch it up a little bit if you're not careful. This piece is fairly nice looking. There's some gunk on it, but it came in covered in oil and goop the way they always do. So let's see how she works. I already made a bend on here. It makes a fairly decently sharp bend, if you can see that. So when you're clamping your stock in this thing, you want to make sure that this bar gets put right on the pivot point. Line up this edge, the back edge of the bar, right with the pivot point. It'll only bend so far forward because it's going to hit this thick bar of steel. And it's also going to hit on the side of the brake body. So stick a piece of aluminum or steel or what have you. This is very lightweight aluminum. And stick her on there. I'm just being very inaccurate here. I just want a little fold. And I'm taking care, as I said, to line this up with the pivot point. I'm going to clamp it down. Doesn't matter too much where exactly you clamp this, I don't think. I would say somewhere outside of your workpiece. No, I'm not quite situated right. Got to come back a little on this side. There we go. We don't want it to bind. If you go too far that way, it's going to bind on this bar as you lift her up. So that's it. It's clamped in there. Pull it up. Goes right a little bit past 90. As I said, it'll spring back a little bit. Take your clamps off. And you've got another little bend there. Not bad. Now, one thing this brake does not do, on a professional brake, you'd be able to stick this in the other way, bend her down, and get a power bend or a full 180 to flatten this over. That, if you can do that, that'll give you a nice folded, non-sharp edge to work with. This aluminum is so thin I can just do it with my hands. It's not going to create the nicest job in the world, but I can fold that right over if I want to. One thing I didn't mention, this, again, I like this piece of steel for clamping down your work stock. It's got a slight bend to it as well, which is a really good thing. If you look at it, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but if you look down the length of it, it's actually curved this way a little bit. It's up here and up here, so that when you put it down on the bed, it's going to rock. But when you clamp it down from the ends, it's going to be tight here, it's going to be tight here, and there's going to be a sort of a spring action in the middle that holds it down firmly to the brake. That's great. I mean, it's a nice touch. What else? That's about all it does. It's not pretty, it's not very big, but for small bending projects, I don't see why this won't do a good job. There's very little play in the body of this thing. Most of the play is back and forth this way, which doesn't matter. When I try to pull it apart, there's a tiny bit, but it's not going to affect the operation of this thing. It's surprisingly beefy. I've heard some reviews of this thing that say it's very flimsy, but I wouldn't be, this is not 18 gauge steel, but I wouldn't see why this would have a problem with it. Again, make sure when you're setting this thing up that your bar, we'll call this the, I forget what do they call it. They call this bar the pressing plate. Make sure this pressing plate is lined right up with that pivot point, meaning the slot, the piece, the line between these two pieces of steel. If that's lined up, you're going to get a good bend out of it. If it's not lined up, you're going to get a rounded, ugly looking bend off it. So this is not just to press it down, it provides the sharp corner for bending your metal against. So my feeling is some of the reviews that say this thing is garbage are by people who don't really know how to bend metal. Not that I'm an expert, but I've done it a little bit. So having said all that, for about 80 bucks, I would say this is a metal brake that can do small jobs just fine. I don't see any issues with it. So thumbs up.